Welcome to Owl Have You Know, a podcast from Rice Business. This episode is part of our Flight Path series, where guests share their career journeys and stories of the Rice connections that got them where they are.
Welcome to Owl Have You Know. Today, we have a magnificent guest, the Managing Director of Rice Alliance, Brad Burke. And it's reunion weekend. There's a lot of energy. There's all this music outside. There's wine, cheese, food. It's like the best weekend ever to be on campus. So we want to thank you for being with us here today. And we want to talk about your illustrious career here at Rice. You've been here for 22 years.
22 years, yes.
The #1 graduate entrepreneurship school in the country, right? So
yes,
pretty big deal.
Yeah,
we talk about that a lot, and you're really a big part of that.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah.
So let's talk about, because I know you like to talk about Rice a lot. But I would like to talk about you a lot and know about your story and how you got started and how I know that you were planning on just staying here for a hot minute at Rice and it turned into 22 years.
It did.
So tell me, so you're from Memphis.
So that's right. So I grew up in Memphis, lived there my whole life and wanted to go to a college that was somewhere far away, but not too far away from home. So I went to Vanderbilt,
in Tennessee,
which is in Nashville. It was 200 miles away. It was before Nashville became cool. Now Nashville is kind of like Austin, but it became cool. And so I went to Vanderbilt knowing that I was going to become a lawyer. I was pre-law, and I stayed pre-law until I took a finance class my senior year. Mm-hmm. Fall of the senior year, I had a faculty member who had a great class, and he said, look, you should try business schools. And he took a piece of paper, wrote down 10 names, drew a line halfway down, and said, you should apply to schools that are above the line. And if you end up having to go below the line, come see me. So I applied to about 3 or 4 business schools. Mm-hmm. I looked at, he wrote both Northwestern and Chicago on the list above the line. And I looked at where they were located. Northwestern's in the suburbs on the lake.
It's cold. It's cold.
So I ended up going to Northwestern, straight from Vanderbilt. I'd also applied to law schools and got in. I thought about doing a joint program, but ultimately said 2 years for an MBA, get a higher salary than you go 3 years as a law student.
Right.
And business was really what I wanted to do and be in.
And so Kellogg School.
So Kellogg.
So you were a baby MBA, what we call baby MBAs, right?
A baby MBA.
That's like original MBA, and you got the professional and you got the executive. So you came into great.
Got a full-time MBA, 2 years. I had no work experience, so I didn't want to even consider like a 4-quarter program or a 1-year program because I needed a summer internship to get some work under my belt that had some relevance. And so I went there, and it was a great experience. Now, the first winter I was in Chicago was the coldest winter they'd ever had in Chicago, and it was the snowiest winter they'd ever had. Being a Tennessee kid, I interviewed with every company that came from a warm place. That was the great strategy, right? So that included Exxon, and so I ended up taking a job with Exxon.
Out of business school?
Out of Kellogg.
Here in Houston.
Well, it would have been Houston, except they said, what would you think about working in a refinery in Baton Rouge? And I said, well, at that time in my life, I said, that sounds cool to learn the business.
Right.
And so I was there for 3 years and then came to Houston after that.
And Exxon brought you to Houston?
Exxon brought me to Houston. That's
okay.
Right.
So how long were you at Exxon?
I was there 15 years.
Wow. In finance?
In finance, primarily. I also did sales. I sold lubricant specialty products for a while in a territory that went from Texas to California to Washington and Hawaii and Alaska.
Wow.
Unfortunately, we didn't have enough business to actually go on a business trip to Hawaii. But
that's where I'd want to go.
But I had a great territory.
Yeah, that sounds like a great territory.
I did that too. So I did finance and sales and marketing.
Okay.
With Exxon.
And so you did that for 15 years.
Did that for 15 years. And at 15 years, I was at that point at the international downstream headquarters. My next job would have been overseas. And at that point, I had to say, am I going to be an Exxon lifer or not? Because if I was going to change jobs, I needed to do it then while I'm still in the U.S. So I decided to interview with a number of management consulting firms and got an offer and did a transition in management consulting for 3 years.
Did you like that?
Yes and no. I liked the travel, and all that comes with it. But what I didn't like was not actually being able to implement the recommendations. So I felt like that they were paying us to develop a recommendation and a strategy.
Couldn't follow through.
And they couldn't, and I could,
we
didn't follow through. And ultimately most of the companies probably don't aren't able to successfully follow through. So I'd rather to do things than suggest recommendations for other people to do things.
Right.
And so I realized that really wasn't my favorite thing.
So 3 years.
3 years. And so this was when the internet was getting started in 90. I went there in 95 and was there through 98.
Wow.
Now, I remember in the middle of that, I remember being on a plane to France on a vacation. And I was like, what do I really want to do with my life when I grow up? And the internet was coming along. And I had a second degree at Vanderbilt in computer science, of all things.
You failed to mention that earlier. So
I
2
did.
degrees.
A 2 degree. Well, I had a double major, not 2 degrees, but a double major in business and computer science.
Okay.
And I'd always sort of wanted to do something in that area. And then the internet came along and I was on this flight. I remember being on this flight to Paris in first class because I had enough miles to travel first class to Paris.
If you have enough miles, I mean, now they're worthless. So then they actually meant something. Yeah.
And so I was like, I think I want to get involved in the internet. Well, a person who I worked for in consulting had gone to a startup company, an internet startup company.
What was it called?
It was called Viant, which no one's heard about. But it was a systems integrator, so we developed websites for people. And he said, hey, what do you think about coming over to Viant? And so in 98, I got recruited over to this internet startup company. Now, I was in Dallas at the time. And so as part of the Dallas office, we were backed by venture capitalists from Silicon Valley. Ultimately, we were like, well, when will we go public? And we went public in 99. So I joined in 98. A year later, we went public. And Goldman Sachs took us public. And the stock ran up like all the other .com stocks did at that time.
The .com era. Yeah.
It went from, $8 to $55. So we're all happy. And we were thinking, we're here for the long term.
For sure.
Now, we're also watching all the inside trades on Yahoo Finance, and we're seeing that the VCs are all selling once the stock went public.
A bit unnerving.
They're selling the stock, and I didn't understand the VC model at that time.
Right.
I didn't know that we were a home run for the venture capitalist.
Right.
But we're all there for the long term, and got to hold our shares for low. If we're going to sell it, we're going to wait a year at least to get the capital gains treatment.
That's not the way that the venture capitalists were.
And they were selling, and we didn't sort of understand the picture, and of course we didn't know what the future held.
Right.
And then demand for our services dropped off and began to kind of peak in 2000, and then 2001 the demand dropped off for these services because the .com boom was over, and so. In the middle of that, I had moved.
A lot of things happened in 2001, actually.
Yeah,
there was a lot of pretty, worldly events that happened at the same time.
It did, and I was in Dallas, but I was traveling to Houston every week because Compaq Computer Corporation, which used to be on the north side of Houston,
yes,
became our biggest client and the biggest client the firm had.
It was by Halliburton.
Yeah. So I was here every week anyway. And so we convinced the management of the company to open an office here. So I opened the Houston office of Viant downtown, rented a floor out, 20,000 square feet, 5-year lease. And while that was being designed and built out, we had temporary space there. And then the .com boom ended and the space never got built out.
Wow.
We closed the office in 2001. And now it's not,
it
was a great ride.
It was a great ride.
It was a great ride.
Sure.
Great front row seat to going public, the .com boom, and a little taste of venture capital and startup world. And so I thought, at that point, I had worked for 21 years, never taken a day off, basically, and I was going to take a year off or so. And then the founder of the Rice Alliance, who was Steve Corral, a faculty member here at the Jones School, said, hey, I'm looking for somebody to run it so I can go back to teaching and
How'd you meet us?
I met him because I was doing marketing and business development, trying to find startups we could sell our work to and we could build websites for. So I was a judge at the very first Rice Business Plan competition because I met Steve. I was a sponsor of the Rice Alliance when I was at Viant. And so I knew him, and
So you believed in their program.
I believed that I was a sponsor of it.
Yeah.
And And so I knew him and then interviewed with it and was lucky that was fortunate to be selected.
And that was the beginning.
That was the beginning. Of
this whole place.
In 2001, I joined in the summer of 2001. And I remember having a conversation, back to something you said a minute ago. I remember having a conversation with Steve, and he said, look, if you come on board, will you at least agree to stay for 2 years? And I remember thinking in his office, I remember this conversation, it's like he and I were about as close together as you and I are. I remember thinking, well, 2 years is a long time. But okay, I'll stay here 2 years. And then
22 years later.
22 years later, I'm still here.
We're still here.
Steve got recruited to London in about 2004, 2005. And so he
London School of Economics? Is that where
he was with University College of London, but he also had a secondary appointment at another university there. And I think it was London School of Economics. Yeah. And so he was in London, and so that was great. From that standpoint, it was a great move for him, and good for the Rice Alliance.
Well, a streamlined transition.
It did.
This is something that you believed in from the very beginning.
Yes.
And so tell me about how you've grown the Rice Alliance to be what it is today, because it is the number one. When people think of entrepreneurship and when people think of, the Rice Business Plan competition, it's bigger than Harvard. It's bigger than, It's the biggest one. So how did you start up that? Because you basically ran a startup.
I did, and it's in some ways it still feels like a startup as well. So I was a judge at the first business plan competition, and we had 9 schools that competed for $10,000. Now, so I came on board 6 months after that first competition, and so I led the 2002 competition, and I said, look, let's just say we're going to triple the prize money and see if we can figure out how to raise it. But we tripled the prize money.
It incentivized quite a few additional startups.
It did. So we had 15 schools, I think, 14 or 15 schools compete for $30,000.
The following year.
The second year of the competition. Then we raised it a little bit more the third year and the fourth year. And finally, in 2005, I looked at some of the other business plan competitions. And what they were doing is they were offering an investment prize for the grand prize winner of $100,000. So $100,000 investment prize, that would be cool if we could do the same thing.
Or even more.
Well, at the time, I would, First, I was just happy to get $100,000. Yeah. Well, the thing was, we always had the vision that we wanted to be the biggest. I wanted to be the biggest and baddest and best business plan competition. So we approached an investor in town, Dr. Jack Gill, who's a well-known, successful venture capitalist who was originally from Texas, but lived in the West Coast for a long time, but then retired from venture capital and came back to Houston.
Why? Why would you leave California?
Well, he's from Texas originally, and the cost of living much better. And, I think he might say, the lifestyle is better as well.
Yeah.
So we approached Jack, and Jack said, what we want to do is get individuals to put up $100,000 investment prize for the winner. And Jack said, yeah, I can do that. And I'll get 4
of my friends.
And we'll have 5 of individuals who agree to put up $20,000 investment each and to come up with the first prize. Well, it turns out we ended up with 6 individuals. We still kept it at $100,000, but we had 6 individuals, including Rod Canyon, the founder of Compact Computer Corporation. We had Michael Holthouse, a successful entrepreneur from Houston, and 3 others. And so we had, in 2005, we had the first $100,000 investment prize. So our prize money, the total that year was about $200,000.
Wow.
Now, what's happened is that once this group of individuals did that, then other angel investment groups said, hey, maybe we could do the same thing.
It's like the tipping point.
It
was Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point.
Exactly. It was the catalyst for the competition. And by about 2006, we had the most prize money of any competition. And at the time, the founder of the competition circuit was UT Austin.
McCombs.
They had been running it for a long time, and they were one of the schools that we saw that had this $100,000 prize. But it was put up by a single individual who, after a few years, decided that they didn't want to do that anymore. But the beauty of our model is that even in the first year, we had 6 individuals. So if one of them said, I want out, didn't it didn't cause a problem. Now, fast forward today, we've got about 25 individuals who were involved in sponsoring, investing in the grand prize winner. And the prize now is $350,000 first place.
Wow.
And, but then that year, 2005 was the first year, right? So they said, we're going to put up, whoever the judges vote on will invest $100,000. But they met with the entrepreneur after the competition and they said, hey, we really kind of like his idea. And so instead of investing $100,000 in that first winner, they invested $1.1 million in that winner.
That was probably unexpected.
It was. It was.
I mean, imagine being that winner.
Yes.
You know, I mean, that's earth change. I mean,
it was life changing.
Yeah.
It has been life changing for that individual who I still stay in touch with. And he ultimately, his company would have failed had it not been for that amount of money and for the advice he got from the members of the group,
this Rice community.
Ultimately, the company sold for over $100 million to Adobe. And so he had a great outcome, and so did the investors, the Goose Capital Group that put up the investment money. And same thing happened in 2006. The team won. They were guaranteed $100,000, but then when they met with the founder of the second company, they said, we really like this company, so we'll invest more. And ultimately, I think they invested about $6 million in that second company, and that company exited as well, had a good exit. I
think that you have just guaranteed that there's going to be significantly more people entering this competition next year just by telling that tidbit of information of just the belief of the people that really believe in the Rice Alliance, that really believe in the competition, that really believe in the startups and the good that they can do and the way that they can change the world, because that's what it's about.
Well, it's amazing. You have the opportunity to mentor these amazing, bright, enthusiastic, young founders who are generally first-time founders. And then you have the opportunity to see this innovation benefit society, come to the world. And so you can see a real impact in what you do.
So what are some of the ones that stick with you?
Oh, there are a lot of them. The second winner created a device for an 18-wheeler going down the highway called a trailer tail. And you may see these going down the highway. So what he figured out was a trailer, an 18-wheeler going on the highway, is like the least aerodynamic thing that you could think of. It's a box with a truck in front pulling it. But what it does, it creates a suction in the back, and so that suction creates drag. So he created a device that would go on the back end of an 18-wheeler on the back of the trailer that would improve fuel efficiency by something between 5 and 8%.
Wow.
And it's billions of gallons of gasoline, of diesel, billions of gallons a year.
So how did he come up with that idea? I'm just curious. Was he just driving down the road, or did he have a background in this? Or
he didn't have a background, but I think he learned of a faculty member who had done research in this around aerodynamics
and physics. I mean,
that's exactly. And he was able to take that technology and then get some data that say, yeah, that really does work. And so then he developed that company.
It's amazing. What else?
It's very cool.
Tell me about another one. Because
one that the individual that I like a lot is a student from Brigham Young University. This was back in probably 14 years ago or so, 15 years ago, created an app to scan QR codes.
It's my favorite thing in the whole wide world.
Oh, well, back then it's commonplace now, right? Almost every app can scan a QR code.
But I mean, that's really like life-changing for me, because that way, I mean, because I serve on a lot of nonprofit boards, and in order to get folks to donate, like, listen, just put a QR code on all of your marketing material, or when you go to a luncheon or when you go to an event, the QR code with their phone, because nobody wants to take out their credit card. That's too much effort. Just simplify people's lives and give them their time back. If you can figure out a way to give somebody back their time. That's the most precious of natural resources.
In the early days of the QR codes, he created one of the first, most popular apps to scan QR codes when you couldn't just do it on your phone camera. Yeah. So he created this app. He had something like, in the first couple weeks, 36 million downloads of this app. He was on Shark Tank, And I don't think he got investment from the sharks at that time because they said his company was overvalued too much, but it drove demand for his app.
What did they know?
What did they know? Yeah, exactly. And they made a big mistake because ultimately he raised about $9 million of investment, which he didn't really need all that money, but he probably raised more than he needed. And then he had an exit. But his exit was private, was not disclosed.
Mm-hmm.
But I got a call one day from one of the investors from Houston, and he said, hey, did you see that? Did you read about this company? The company was called Scan. And I said, no, tell me about it. We'll go on the web, and it turns out that now here's a convoluted way to get around to this. When the movie comedy, The Interview, came out, it was about North Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And the North Koreans didn't like that movie, and it was put out, I think, by Sony.
Shocking.
They hacked into Sony's web servers, and as a result, some of the emails that were confidential got disclosed. One of the emails that got disclosed was from an executive at Snapchat to an executive at Sony, and it said, hey, we're not going to disclose this, but we have just acquired Scan for $54 million.
Wow.
So if you had invested in this company, you would have done really well. And but most people didn't.
Right.
And he didn't do that well with the competition because people said, well, that's just an app to scan QR codes.
Well, it's the most basic things that people don't really think. It's a chess game, right? And I think that a lot of times there's people with phenomenal ideas and they get rejected over and over again. And you know what, like the light bulb that failed over 1,000 times.
He said one day, one of his stories was, he had a meeting with a VC on Sand Hill Road, which is where all the VCs are in Silicon Valley. And he said, I got there early, and so I just decided to walk up and down the road and knock on VC doors. And I said, well, I'll try to talk my way into it. Now, and he says, I tried to talk my way into about 10 different VCs, and he never got past the gatekeeper on any of them.
Oh, gosh.
So he didn't even get in. And the VC that he talked to had no interest in investing. So his investment came from other places. But this changed his life because he sold his company for a lot of money. And then he said, look, what I want to do is travel. And so he created what he's branded as the bucket list family. And so prior to COVID, he spent about 4 years traveling every week to a different place, posting a video about that location that he's in. And then he taken his kids with him too. So now he has 3 young kids, and they've traveled all over the world. And basically I said, well, so you using the money that you earned, right? He said, no, they figured out a model that allowed monetize his adventure travel.
Could he share that with me? Because I would really like that. That would be ideal. Like if you could just give me his number, I'll give him a call, figure it out, because that's brilliant. Okay, so what is the future for the Rice Alliance? Where are we going next?
Well, it's a number of things. I mean, one is the business plan competition has continued to get bigger. So I said we started with 9 teams. We now have 42 teams. Last year, at the end of the banquet, we were at the total prize money was $2 million, the highest ever. But that wasn't all, because the same thing that happened back in 2005 happened last year. So the group that put up the grand prize, after they again met with the company, they said, we really like this. So they put in $1.5 million in last year's winner, but they led a round. The total round was about $5.5 million. So the winner of our competition last year got $5.5 million, led by investors from Houston.
Wow.
And in total, the Goose Capital Group has invested $27 million in business plan competition winners.
Yes, it's just becoming a really big VC place, I mean, more so than Austin.
Well, there's a lot, especially angel investors who want to give back and support entrepreneurs. A group of judges saw what the Goose Capital Group was doing, and they got together and said, hey, we can do the same thing. So we have 275 judges at the competition. A group of them came to me at the end of the banquet and said, look, hey, we can do the same thing the Goose can, but we won't invest each as much. And so, led by a Rice alum who is a West Coast venture capitalist, has organized a group called the Owl Investment Group. Mm-hmm. Every year they put up an investment prize, and they have now invested over $5 million in business plan competition teams, way more than they initially signed up to do. So this competition has mobilized a number of individuals who really weren't doing angel investment before.
Right.
And now they're doing not just investment in the business plan competition, but they're investing in companies from Houston as well.
Right. And Houston is now becoming, this with the ION and everything else. I mean, it's really becoming the place to be, which is also exciting. And to be just right down the street, and Rice is very much involved with the ION, and you've got the medical center right here, and it's exciting times to be at Rice.
It's a great time to be at Rice.
Exciting time to be in Houston.
We launched about 11 years ago. We launched a accelerator for students in the summer called the Spark Accelerator. The initial idea, wasn't a particularly novel idea, but it was started by 4 students at Rice. And one of the students, an MBA student, deferred his McKinsey full-time career so he could run it the first year.
Wow.
So he ran it the first year, and then we took it over in year 2. And so we've completed 11 years of the Spark Accelerator, I think 10 or 11 years. We've had 77 or so startups that have gone through it, and they've raised over $100 million.
Amazing.
In that time. And then last summer, so those are for tech startups. Last summer, we started a second accelerator if you have a small business, a consumer product business, a non-traditionally VC backable business.
Right.
And so last year we started the first cohort of what we call the Blue Launch Accelerator. And it is for consumer products and other...
I get those emails.
Other startups. Yeah. So we expanded to a second. So we cover those individuals who want to start a company.
Yes.
But it's not a high-tech company, and it's likely not going to get venture capital.
But really creating opportunities for all of those that really want to get involved.
Yes.
This is the Mecca.
So if you have, like, you come to Rice to come to school, or you come to get your MBA, if you have an interest in learning about entrepreneurship or getting into entrepreneurship, there's so many programs that you can get into, like Spark or Blue Launch, where you can, with low risk, you can for 3 months work on your company and decide, is this something that really has legs and that I want to stay with? And so it's very cool.
Well, it's what are you the most looking forward to? What's for the next year? What are you excited about the most? Last question, and then I'll leave you alone.
Oh, okay. What is really huge right now, and the momentum is behind the energy transition in Houston. All of the major oil and gas companies, traditionally are, they're 10 years ago were focused on how do we produce more oil, how do we produce it more efficiently. They have all now embraced that we're entering this energy transition period where we'll have both oil and gas and we'll have renewable and sustainable fuels. Ultimately, that's the long term.
Right.
And we're in this period of time.
Nuclear fusion as well. But
Exactly. That in fact may be the answer. But
agreed.
We are in this period. So we launched a clean energy accelerator 2 years ago, and we're about to start. We're evaluating the applicants for the 3rd cohort of the clean energy accelerator. And part of the reason is we're attracting startups from all over the U.S. and outside the U.S. to come through the accelerator with we want to help them be more successful, but we also want to show them what's going on in Houston, what they have at the ION and what they have at other places in Houston, so that they think about starting the company here or moving here, or at least opening an office here.
Right.
And we also want to show the investors in Houston really promising clean energy technologies. And so it gives investors in Houston like an early look at some of these promising technologies. So Houston, I think, has the ability, we've been the energy capital of the world. We have the ability to be the energy transition capital of the world because we have the knowledge, the expertise, the resources here, and almost every major energy investor knows about Houston and is aware of it and has a presence here. So I think it's going to be transformative for the city.
And it all starts here. It's where you belong, right?
Right.
Rice is where you belong. Thank you, Brad. It's been a pleasure to talk with you and to learn about your story. I think that there's many that know about the Rice Alliance, but you're very humble and you don't really talk much about yourself. So thank you for sharing all that with us.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for listening. This has been I'll Have You Know, a production of Rice Business. You can find more information about our guests, hosts, and announcements on our website, business.rice.edu.
Please subscribe and leave a rating wherever you find your favorite podcasts. We'd love to hear what you think. The hosts of I'll Have You Know are myself, Maya Pomroy, and Scott Gale.